Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk. Yet again, we've got Xoaquin Flores. He stuck around for another recording. We did one just a minute ago. Xoaquin, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back after a coffee break.
Coffee break.
And I guess the viewers at home are going to see these like days apart, huh?
Well, it might be a day, it might be two. It depends on my schedule, and if I mix them up, nothing is here is like there's no format. Let's put it that way. The only thing that is certain is this is a comedy show, and nothing we say has anything to do with reality. That is certain. Everything else is up to interpretation, including my uploading schedule.
Yeah, no connection to reality.
Speaking of, last time we got into some coast to coast AM type topics, and I couldn't remember the name. While we were recording, I did look it up, but I didn't bring it up. It is actually George Noory, Noory.
Yeah, he's the one who came after Art Bell. I remember George Noory. Yeah.
He's actually Lebanese Christian, so like that was interesting to find out. But yeah, I used to listen to Coast AM in the 2010s type of thing, maybe.
For me, it was in the 90s, the late 90s, mid-late 90s. It was like on a KFI AM 640 in the Southern California area.
Yeah, like on actual AM. Yeah. Okay, so we've got a bunch of things to get into, like our leftovers, you can say, from the previous talk we did. Shall we start off with some funnier topics first? This is a comedy show, so they have to be at least a little funny. Have you seen what Chinese exams for qualification for art school look like?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, that's a great one.
Damn. How do you feel about Chinese population?
Feel? Is that a question of feeling?
Yeah. Do you feel?
I don't know I don't think it inspires any. I mean, I guess one could be awestruck that there's that many people, in one polity, in one political system, basically. But that's conceptual. I mean, you can think of the collective West as almost like one country, and that's like 1 billion people.
Yeah, they wish they were one country. They wish they were the golden billion. They're not.
Yeah,
I love your silence.
China has got it's such a story there. I mean, with all the things that the country that they've been through with the in the 20th century with the Japanese occupation and all that, and the guerrilla war and the Long March and the civil war between the communists and the nationalists.
Is nationalists like whitewashing for like they were basically Nazis?
No, but it's funny that you mentioned that because in the Italian communist director Bertolucci, his movie The Last Emperor, it does depict the nationalist troops wearing brown shirts with like red armbands and stuff. So they were influenced, but it's a very complex story because the communists were quintessential in establishing the nationalists as well. So the communists were in the nationalists, like they were not even independent from the nationalists until around 1927. So
yeah, what can I say? Yeah. No surprise there.
But when I mention things like that, people go, "Oh, he knows a few things," and I don't know that much. It's just a lot of people know a lot less, I guess.
China last year built 47 new coal-fired power plants. We already know what your thoughts are on the green agenda, so I'll skip that. Let's do this quickly, get it out of the way. Hi everyone who's a patron Everybody who's bought me a coffee and all that good stuff, thank you. Like, share, subscribe to all the others. Thank you for being here. Now, let's move along. We've got Putin. Shall we get into Putin?
Yes,
and the nuke doctrine?
Yes, there's a new nuclear doctrine.
What does a new nuclear doctrine mean for you? How do you feel about the new nuclear? We'll call this episode. We'll call this talk. XF talks about his feelings.
Right, like my feelings about things that are not feeling subjects. Yeah, I mean it's you could be scared. Yeah, maybe it's scary to think that, you know, the escalation in this conflict has gotten to the point where, you know, we're talking nuclear stuff. I mean, that's been ongoing for a while. So, but I think the clarification, I think what we're seeing, it's kind of like they're saying it's a new nuclear doctrine, but it's actually just more specific about what you would have discerned it to be anyway, because what they're saying specifically, like the long and short of it is like, look, they say very interesting, they say like, you guys know what countries we're talking about. They say that like you can deduce quite easily like what country we're talking about. They're actually saying, a country that's not a nuclear power, but they're you know, being assisted and, you know, aided and allied by nuclear powers is doing an attack, we're going to consider that a joint attack. And so it's from a nuclear power, basically. So we're going to be.
Let's take a break and have a listen to Putin, the Kremlin, from the Kremlin, Russian propaganda, brought to you by Inessa S, formerly on YouTube, now on Telegram. The translation, that is. Let's see what Putin here has to say.
Аппарата Совета Безопасности и других ведомств провели глубокий всесторонний анализ, оценили необходимость корректировки наших подходов к возможному использованию ядерных сил. По результатам этой работы предложено внести ряд уточнений в части определения условий применения ядерного оружия. Так, в проекте основ расширена категория государств и военных союзов, в отношении которых проводятся ядерные сдерживания. Дополнен перечень военных угроз, для нейтрализации которых выполняются мероприятия ядерного сдерживания. На что еще особо хотел бы обратить ваше внимание. В обновленной редакции документа агрессию против России со стороны любого неядерного государства, но с участием или при поддержке ядерного государства предлагается рассматривать как их совместное нападение на Российскую Федерацию. Также четко фиксируются условия перехода России к применению ядерного оружия. Будем рассматривать такую возможность уже при получении достоверной информации о массированном старте средств воздушно-космического нападения и пересечении ими нашей государственной границы. Имея в виду самолеты стратегической или тактической авиации, крылатые ракеты, беспилотники, гиперзвуковые и другие летательные аппараты. Оставляем за собой право применить ядерное оружие в случае агрессии против России и Белоруссии как участника союзного государства. С белорусской стороной, с президентом Беларуси все эти вопросы согласованы. В том числе, если противник, используя обычное оружие, создает критическую угрозу нашему суверенитету. В завершение отмечу, что все уточнения являются глубоко выверенными и соразмерными современным военным угрозам и рискам в отношении Российской Федерации. За последний год специалисты Министерства обороны.
Yes.
That sounds like Florida's castle doctrine.
Right, yeah, it's like stand your ground, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we summed it up. Shall we move on?
Yeah, that's what we had summed up, man. So what do you think about that?
What do I think or what do I feel? I thought this was a
Yeah,
feelings
what the fuck
talk.
feelings and shit. Like,
I feel that it's high time that this was said out loud. I feel.
those are thoughts, man.
No, they're not
We
thoughts.
always
They're
have to be able
feelings.
to, like, there's a
No,
basic
don't gaslight
mental
me.
health type of
Don't
thing, or like
gaslight me.
you know,
Don't
like a
gaslight me.
cognitive behavioral thing, man. Like beliefs, feelings, and thoughts are like three different things, you know?
But those are feelings that I feel now. They're not beliefs that I hold. They're not thoughts that I have. They're feelings that I feel now.
No, they're thoughts that you're having now, man. You might
Nope.
feel a certain way about those thoughts, but they're thoughts.
No, they're feelings, man. You don't understand. You're just too old school.
Everything is feelings. No, I had a coworker. He was hilarious. What was his name? Ernesto Ayala. He was this communist guy at the labor union. Anyway, he was like, he would always articulate his opinion by saying, I feel, he would start by saying, I feel that blah, blah, blah. And I was like, feel? Yeah, what? That's such a nice way to massage it, you know, in. It's like, it's because it's not saying I think, because when you say I think, you're kind of saying like, this is what's true.
No, you're saying this is my stance.
Yeah,
Or this is my stance.
Whereas feel is
Yeah.
kind of like, well, I'm feeling
Meh.
like this. What do you feel? Or what do you think, you know?
Exactly. So, I feel that it's high time that this was said. How do you feel about this? Or what do you think?
I feel hungry about it. I feel a little hungry, maybe a little cold.
So you're looking forward to the nukes, huh? You learned to love the bomb.
Yeah, I've learned to love the bomb because, you know, you have to embrace these things. If something's going to be inevitable, look, people are pushing back against this. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But the thing is that the elites in the West can definitely push and push until Russia does something nuclear. Or they can do something nuclear first and see how Russia responds. Either way, you know, the amount of agency that we have over that type of thing is questionable, because it's like, if the elites have a plan for their own survival in a post-nuclear scenario, I mean, it's hard to imagine what they're thinking, but you look at, you know, Zuckerberg's, you know, Hawaii underground compound. The location tells you a lot, and it being underground tells you a lot, right? So, you know, generally, when people think about nuclear risk, you're talking about the global north. The global south is pretty safe in terms of nuclear risk.
That's true, man. It's always funny that little detail, how like nuclear war, it's always like within the, as you say, northern hemisphere, quote unquote,
Right.
and the southern hemisphere is just like, you know, there in the background, just chilling.
Right. It might be
Not to
nuclear
mention-
background radiation, but it's definitely going to be in the background. And I mean, it's like,
Actually, I think
They
the way
have,
the air currents work, they don't mix that much, so like they'd be pretty safe from the fallout, even in the long
yeah,
term, even in like
you know, it's,
50 to 100 years.
the thing that we
thing.
need to understand about they've been nuking us for 70 years already, dude. They've been nuking
Yes, I
us.
know.
Every time they do a fucking nuclear explosion above ground, that's a fucking nuke that was detonated, you know, and like the state of New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada is like covered with that shit, you know. And we wonder about cancer rates, you know, skyrocketing in the US. And you kind of get, I saw recently people talking about, oh, look at all these dyes and chemicals in the food. Yeah, that's huge. Like that is huge, right? Like, but what about all the nuclear testing? Like maybe that has a little something to do with all of the cancer in the U.S. is all of the nuclear testing they did above ground.
We've actually discussed this nuclear testing idea and the fact that they've been nuking us, quote unquote. So this is a meme that I made a couple of days ago, and it has something to do with what we're talking about, in the sense that like now you guys are actually getting to see some of the stuff that we talk about before we record. So that does happen.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are even debates about the extent to which nuclear bombs are real, but why I remember that, and that has to do with the way that propaganda films were made about early nuclear tests, which are clearly collage, like in the method of collage film. Like before green screen and before, those, you had like the techniques developed by the Russian or Soviet filmmaker, Sergei Eisenstein. And that those are, there's strong evidence of collage and numerous nuclear explosion clips. But,
Did I say this is a comedy show? Did I say it this recording? This is a comedy show.
I don't really get behind it. The thing is that I know personally people that were Cold Warrior Americans, that were people from the World War II.
What does Cold Warrior Americans mean?
A Cold Warrior American, and people that were veterans of World War II that had been in the military or in the period of the Korean War, who were from that time, like the 40s and 50s, and maybe they're now retired in the 50s. So.
Time out. Do they necessarily need to be veterans of World War II in order to be Cold War Americans, or can they just be veterans of any of the wars, including Cold War II plus Korea, Vietnam?
I would say that generationally speaking, to describe the generation that the people came from, we're talking about people that were born in the 1920s. Or so, maybe 1930s. So we're talking about people that were young in the 40s and 50s, but they might have been not like ranking officers, but they were veterans of the Korean War or the World War II in that period, right? So people that were born in the 20s and 30s, right? You understand, because those wars were in the 40s and 50s. So that generation, that's what I'm saying. So what they were doing as a hobby was going to watch the nuclear tests. Like they would kind of dress up, like put their General MacArthur sunglasses on, and they would go.
Yeah. There's famous pictures of that. Let me find one while you talk.
All right. Yeah. So the point there is that like those people are all dead of cancer now, right? So there's something going on with. There's something going on, definitely. So I'm not in the camp that nuclear bombs are not real, personally. I'm open-minded to continual evidence if I have fucking time for it, or if I find relevance in it continually. You know what I mean? Nothing for me is like a settled matter. Well, some things are settled matters, but this is not something that involves enough. This is the facts involved in this for me as I have awareness of where I sit. Remember our long discourse about like facts versus like reality versus existence and shit like that.
Yes.
So I'm aware that all the facts about nuclear energy, nuclear power, nuclear bombs are facts in the historical sense, like in the legal sense of facts. They're not facts that I have observed. Like there's no, you know what I mean? I can't point to it, or it's not tangible to me. It's a theory, Now nuclear tests, are pretty strong testament to their reality, but I'm aware that there's anomalies and fakes in the early film. But people can separate that you have a fake of a film from the event or the thing not happening. Those are two different things. So
that's like
the point is, so many people have gotten cancer who went voluntarily to watch these, above ground nuclear tests, and you say, well, what about, Nagasaki, Hiroshima? It's like, well, the argument, I think that they were nuked. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying the argument would be that there's an equivalent amount of conventional, let's say TNT in bombs that could have produced the type of Dresden-like, firestorm effect that you saw in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, especially because all the structures are made out of wood.
There's a lot of tropes in that like stuff that you just blurted out, but I'm just gonna say, people should look up pictures of Tokyo destruction, because Tokyo was firebombed, unlike Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the pictures look exactly the fucking same as the ones where the nuke went off. That's all I'm gonna say on that subject, because this is a comedy show and we just make jokes.
I mean, there's no denying that. There's no denying that they. So that's why I said, like, it's like, for me, I'm aware of conceiving that, I'm capable of conceiving that could have been a propaganda thing. There's a super weapon, and so therefore World War II is the war to end all wars. And you can understand that just on the face of it, without a lot of digging deep, you could understand that just like how the Soviets and the US would have agreed on the space race and other things related to that, they could agree also that on things about of this kind of more globular, type of perspectives, let's say, you know what I mean? And that kind of unify, present a unified sense of reality, that the Soviets and the Americans always were kind of operating in the same, their scientism, secularism, futurism, technologism, all those isms, forward-looking, secular, modern, technologically based, industrial society, scientific, rational. Those were the, very common themes between the US and the Soviets. So, I mean, yeah, one could easily, in the same way that they agreed not to call each other out about the moon shit, they could have agreed that we're gonna promote this myth that there's something called nuclear bombs, and that, I could definitely understand how that works. Don't get me wrong. I'm articulating it, I think, the way that people would. But I know people that got cancer, personally. I know these people that were military people, and they're dead now, and they died of cancer, and they were horrible deaths, and they know exactly that it was because they were out as a fucking sport, as a spectator sport, let's say, in the American Southwest, to go watch these nuclear tests. So, now, that said, while I do believe that nuclear weapons are real, that doesn't mean that the science of what we're doing with the atom is correct. One thing I have learned in life and in my rigorous critique and of, let's say, some of the epistemic foundations of contemporary science, reveals a number of inadequacies in this arena. And I like to always mention how we make airplanes, but we don't really quite understand how lift works, but we know that airplanes work. So you don't need to have a correct theoretical scientific principle if the thing that you've produced is the product of testing and testing.
You're saying
so the Wright brothers didn't need to understand whether there was,
forget the Wright brothers, man. Forget the Wright brothers.
Or a higher pressure zone below the wing. You see what I mean?
Forget the Wright brothers, man. Just go back to Eureka. Who was it that said Eureka when he figured out the floating stuff in his bathtub?
Archimedes.
There you go. Was it Archimedes? I think it was.
Yes, Archimedes.
So it's the same thing. We don't have to understand it or name it, or like things used to float before it was named floating.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Things were floating before the theory of buoyancy and how that actually works. You can see it work, and then you can debate what is happening there. And people need to understand, like when people say, oh, you don't believe in science, then why are you using a phone? It's like, no, you don't understand. Like, these are applied technologies that you tinker, and you have an idea, and you could be in the right direction, but you can be in the right direction in the applied sense, but your theoretical foundation could be totally something else. So, I mean, it's not going to be a total surprise when they figure out one day how flight actually works, but they are debating it to this very day. But it did not stop, that they didn't wait to roll out airplanes. You know what I mean? So likewise, with nuclear bombs, I would say that it's just understanding through the lens of like things like Kuhn's exploration of revolutions and scientific paradigms. It's more likely than not that in the future we'll have a revised theory of what's going on at that, level that we now call the atom. I mean, remember that 70 years ago, 80 years ago, they rolled out a kind of visualization. It's called Bohr's model, BOHR, of the atom. And it's like the one that you think of like in The Simpsons with the nuclear logo that's got like the, right? So the thing is that that's not at all like how these things like look or operate, right? Yeah, I thought that
this is what you're talking about.
Yeah. And you can see that it's basically like it. You can see that the conceptualization follows from a very well established method from like the 15th and 16th century. Like we're talking about from the period of like Tycho Brahe or Copernicus and so forth. You're like the idea that all these things are perfect and that they operate like in this way that we can visualize in terms of like here's the sun and here's each orbital path of each planet going around. So they kind of took that and applied it to the what's going on the microcosm or the sub or atomic and subatomic level. And of course something is going on, but like think about just how we think about things and how over time our understanding of things changes. Like there's a lot of good medical practices that people have been doing for thousands of years that we didn't have the methods to do the blood work or whatever to be like, oh yeah, that is actually working, right? But it didn't keep people from doing it, and it didn't mean that it didn't work until we figured out why it worked. So we have a kind of stupid idea about how science actually works that is actually promoted by scientism. You get the like.
So you're feeling. Hold on, let me sum this up. So your feeling on Putin's feelings on Putin's new nuclear doctrine are that it's basically a dual slit experiment. And we don't know whether nukes exist.
Well, I would say it's more like Schrodinger's. It's more like Schrodinger's atomic bomb because it can both exist and not exist at the same time. But I mean, yeah.
So it's like Putinger's atomic bomb, basically, is what you're getting at. Yes.
Well, from the perspective of strategic culture. What people understand about strategic culture is that these are ideas in a society about nuclear war at the strategic level, right? So what's a strategic culture is always in the history of the question of strategic culture is always about strategic nuclear weapons. So strategic culture is a very important study. So you can imagine how crazy it would be, right? If in one of the two countries where nuclear weapons are massively proliferated, right, like the US or Russia, right, wouldn't it be funny if like in one of those two countries that the people stopped believing that nuclear bombs were a thing? So how would that affect your strategic culture if you didn't even believe that they were real, right?
That's what I was kind of going to get at, because I saw somebody talking about it, and I can't remember who it was or whether it was actual, like, how should I say, proper dissection of news, or whether it was like conspiracy theory, somebody just jabbering. But the point is that they were getting at the idea that the Russians recently had a nuclear ICBM test fail. It was a Sarmat missile. Called Satan by the West for no reason.
That's the NATO designation, by the way.
I know.
People
that's why I said Sarmat.
Like, NWO Putin. Yeah, no, that's the NATO designation.
Yeah, so they had a test and it failed. It exploded in the silo, apparently. And it's all over the Western media. And at the same time, the West is ramping up the whole let's deep strike into Russia with no consequences because, haha, it's by proxy. And now we have this new change in doctrine, which outlines, like, my house, my rules.
Right. Yeah. So you'll recall that in the kind of beginning of this war in Russia, Ukraine, in the 2022 onward period, right? You'll remember that there was fake news from the Ukrainian side, but Americans were saying this. It was really, really scary, very stupid stuff they were saying. They were saying that the Patriot batteries were successful in shooting down all of the hypersonic missiles. So therefore, we should actually declare that Russia is actually no longer nuclear capable since they don't have a real method of delivery, right? So you'd have to believe that the Patriots shot down 100% or even one of the hypersonic missiles. And we know that those hypersonic are nuclear capable as well. That's the point of it. So it's one of the points of having them. So they were trying to basically say that we should not worry about Russia's red lines. We should not worry about, what Russia has said, if you do this, we'll do that, because really they don't have a method of deliveries. And we proved it with the Patriot. So that is a very interesting example in strategic culture of a country talking itself into crazy. You know what I mean? Imagine if higher up brass embraced that view, how that would be Peter Sellers, that would be like kiss your ass goodbye. That would, you know what I mean?
Talking itself into crazy, that happened long ago. And you're saying higher brass, and I'm imagining the higher brass in the U.S. Army. Have you seen the higher brass in the U.S. and these Western armies?
Unfortunately.
Okay, we won't flash any images to not give any brain damage to people. Okay, now that we've discussed nukes and potential for World War III, I think it's a perfect segue to get into gaming and get your take on. By the way, you are a gamer. People don't may not know you like to play games from time to time. Not with people, just on PC. You wanna give
the console gaming? I tried to get into a PS4 game that's like the Assassin's Creed one with Valhalla and Odyssey. That was maybe 7 years ago or something like that. But yeah, console games are not as interesting as PC games. But yeah, definitely I would say I'm a gamer.
You play strategy games generally. This is a first-person shooter. We're going to be discussing Battlefield 2042, and I just want to give.
I would say that up my alley are more like grand strategy, games. Maybe in the more original Total War, Creative Assembly kind of stuff. I have big criticisms of Creative Assembly and what can be done with the Total War franchise. I've over the years, it's funny you mentioned that games and shit. I've thought about doing just a gaming channel just to do Total War, but I see what happens. I saw how that ecosystem works, and it's not a good one. There was a really talented Pakistani guy. I think he was in the U.S. and he tried to do a very good critical deconstruction of Total War and where Creative Assembly should have taken it and could go still. And then he was like, you know what, fuck this. So I was like, you know what, I think you're right, dude. Someone else is just going to come out with a better game, and Creative Assembly is never going to, get rid of the Warscape engine. But anyway, yeah, you're telling us about Battlefield 2042 or 2049 or what is it?
2042 is what it's called.
Yeah.
that is the year that it takes place, and I will play. I will play a little intro here from a compilation of the history of the lore of Battlefield shared in chat earlier. This is a 4-hour video, and here is a little intro about what happens in the Battlefield universe.
The final entry to the series so far, Battlefield 2042. 2042 takes place in the near future, with climate change having devastated the world's atmosphere. So much so that all of the satellites in orbit around the planet have crashed to the surface. Following this event, the world is thrust into yet another world war, as the last remaining superpowers, the United States and the Russian Federation, battle for control of the dwindling resources. But that's about it. There's no real story this time around, as Battlefield 20...
That was the intro originally. That was posted 2 years ago. But since then, the lore and the story of Battlefield has evolved and has been released. And one of the things that got me on the subject, and I wanted to bring it up with you, was when you play recently, when you pop in during the loading screens, there's a lot of messages and hints and tips and stuff that pop up. And now they get these little quotes of one-sentence storylines of what's happening in the universe of Battlefield 2042. Now, people who know Battlefield will know that the franchise has a history of predicting the future. And the reason that I bring that up is, where is my little thing? There we go. We've got the elites. Do tell us through their books and publications, movies and news releases, and I'm adding games, what they are doing. It is called a revelation of the method. If you are too stupid, blah, 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 we won't read that part, but you guys can read it for yourself. So it is the revelation of the method, and it is predictive programming, in my opinion. That is what I feel about it. Exactly. That is how I feel about it. And when this pops up on my screen that says nearly 50 countries have gone defunct since the 2030s, I just wanted to see how you feel about this predictive programming that 50 countries are going to be going defunct by the 2030s.
By the 2030s?
Yeah. Since the 2030s. In the future. Like, we're talking from 2042, so it's since the 2030s. But from here, it's from the 2030s, I guess, onwards.
Yeah, so yesterday I shared a song on my Telegram channel from the 80s, and it was about events taking place in the year 2029. And then it's like, wait a minute, that's just in less than 5 years. It's like in 4 years and 3 months from now, right? So yeah, I mean, with Battlefield and Predictive or any other games, also Command and Conquer Generals had a lot of predictive programming in it as well.
Command and Conquer, man. We are living in Command and Conquer. What are you talking about, predictive programming? We're living it. As soon as
at the time in the past, the Command and Conquer stuff was predictive programming, especially games like Generals, to what we're now.
So, man, as soon as the serious stuff started and the jihadis started to get pickups or technicals, as they're called, with mounted machine guns, I was like, damn, I've seen that before. It was in Generals, you know.
Yeah, it was also in Back to the Future.
Possibly.
It was in Back to the Future when I think in the sequel, the second one, where the professor is like materializes in the parking lot by the Twin Peaks or whatever, the Twin Oaks fucking mall, and then the jihadis appear behind him or whatever, or something like that. They're like, I forget how it was, but it was a pickup truck with a mounted gun on the back. It was like a white Toyota. It was like the whole 9 yards, the whole Allahu Akbar thing and all this. But you know, it's the thing is that the term predictive programming, as we were talking about, I don't know if we were in Working Brothers Studios at one pre-show, but it was at WB Studios, right? Like Warner Brothers, homie, right?
Comedy show.
There at
Comedy show.
WB Studios, we were
Comedy show.
doing it. We were planning the next comedy show, and I think I was trying to break down for you how actually the term predictive programming is wrong, but it refers to a different thing, but now it somehow means this. And very similar is like how the term social engineering got changed from.
Do you want to clear that up for people?
To like how to use conversations to gain access to people's passwords and stuff. Like, anyway, a totally different meaning than what social engineering means in its real meaning, right? In terms of sociology, applied sociology.
Time out. You can't do that and not define them properly. You have to define them properly, both now.
Okay. Predictive programming is like more. Okay, this is the best way to explain. When you're typing something into Google and then it does predictive rest of what you wanted to say.
Yeah.
Okay, that refers to predictive programming. Okay, like programming in computers that allows them to almost like a language module, like you have like in so-called AI, is more like language module is more like predictive programming than how we somehow made it be, right?
So you're saying
social engineering is actually applied sociology to like change how populations act or behave or think on a sociological scale, whereas they've made it be like how to use a honeypot or something and a fake avatar to talk someone on Facebook into handing over your password or something. It's just a totally different meaning. But we'll play with the one that people are using, predictive programming. But it serves a lot of different purposes. It's not just revelation of the method. It's like, because people just don't always visualize or conceptualize the complexity of organizations or the hierarchies or all the different people in them. It's not just like the organization is trying to get the public to think something or see something, and then that's predictive programming. It's actually about like ordering your own organization. Like, so you visualize a pyramid shaped organization, and it's about actually how you order, support, and create energy and commitment around a project. So, there's another layer of predictive programming, which is very so-called predictive programming, right? In this funny way the word gets used now, that's a little bit experimental because it has to do with how people, it has to do with sort of experiments about if everyone is thinking a certain thought, or if everyone has a certain thought image imprinted in their consciousness, like what is the relationship between those types of things that get like through a process of, let's say, inception or insertion into, through suggestion or imagery or exposure to an abstract representation, like in film or art of something, then to what degree at the level of mass consciousness if this image is widely mimetic in people's minds, then to what extent does that even have a role in the process of bringing that reality into fruition? You see, so there's it's a very complicated subject that it gets even experimental into questions about the relationship between consciousness and reality. What is leading what? Have we put the cart before the horse? Right. So that's a very interesting question.
So it's the question of what does the word "is" mean? What is?
Yeah. What is it? What is? I mean, when we say something is independent from our thoughts about it, we can't really. There's no really such thing to say objectively. Something. Right. In the most rigorous sense, you can say intersubjectively. There's agreement. But there's no view from nowhere. So it's like. But with predictive programming, there's a deep experiment going on into the relationship between mass consciousness and reality formation. Like, does an idea in everyone's head have a better chance of becoming into reality, right? Like, is there some relationship between people's thoughts and it becoming immanentized or instantiated in the world, like later,
Yes.
after, as a consequence of it being part of people's mass thought? So, like, the more conventional approach to this is just that people will accept it, or they'll know the drill.
Witches would agree with you. Witches would say it was highly likely that the mass ritualistic concentration of forces will bring something about. But let's get off of that for a little bit and meander back onto this Battlefield 2042 stuff that I've got loaded here. I've got another one that I forgot to screenshot so that I can put up here, but it explains, it's a blurb. I think it's from Wikipedia originally. 2042 takes place 2 decades after the events of the War of 2020. Extreme climate change events take place during the 2030s, causing massive global upheaval. The collapse of many government powers and the shuttering of borders has resulted in over 1.2 billion people becoming displaced, many of them outcasts, band together for mutual survival, becoming known as the non-patriated, or no-pats for short. By 2037, advances in technology have allowed humanity to begin rebuilding global society, and some of the remaining countries begin to open their borders once again. However, distrustful of the governments, the old world that abandoned them, many no-pats refuse to rejoin their former nations and create their own identity, unbound by loyalty to any country. How close to what you expect does that sound?
Let me put my hand up here and pause this just for a minute, and then I'm going to see a man about a horse and come back and answer your question.
All right, hold on one second. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, pause. All right, and we're back.
I feel much lighter now. So,
through the magic of editing. Through the magic of editing, well, not actually editing, but live pausing this recording, I have this on screen now. So it says that, 2042 takes place after the wars of 2020, after climate change has effed us in the 2030s, and by 2037 technology has advanced so far that people want to rejoin society, but some people don't want to rejoin society, and there's 1.2 billion people that are displaced and are considered.
Okay. When did this game go into production?
Go into production?
Like, when was it announced? Like, when was it announced?
I'll have to look that up.
It was going to come out? What year did it come out? And then when was it announced that it would be coming out?
I'll have to look that up. Hold on, give me a second. Where is this? BF 2042 wiki. Let's see what happens. Wiki fandom. Known as Battlefield 2042. Was announced and released on May 26, 2023.
It was released in May 23.
No,
it cannot have been announced when it was released.
No, that's the Elite Edition. No, sorry, that's the Elite Edition. The game was revealed on June 9th, 21, and released on November 21. There you
Revealed means that's at a gaming convention when it was
But
when it would have gone into production would have been like 2019 is what I'm trying to get at.
Probably, yeah.
So the reason why I wanted to go there is because, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity to actually talk about some of the ideas that I'm working on, which I guess is why I'm here.
No, you're here to make jokes. This is a comedy show.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. My ideas are humorous. So what you can find is that with, or at least they're entertaining, you know, if you want to entertain them. But I think it's like, the conflict that you're seeing right now, let me put it this way. The story of Battlefield, the setup of the background story of Battlefield 2042, right, is actually a little late. And it's a little bit, it's not what's happening. And it's not, it could still happen, but we're not tracking. Right now, we are not tracking for that to happen. So I'll tell you what, how kind of, we talked about revelation of the method. Well, the revelation of my method, part of my secret sauce and how I conduct analysis about what is actually happening and why things are happening is that, number one, people typically make the erroneous assumption that what is happening is going along with some plan, in the sense that it's the optimal choice or the first plan. You know, of course, everything can be planned around, planned for in the contingency sense. But what I'm saying is that the world that we're living in right now is not the way that the that some of the global elites associated with the North Atlantic Treaty. I'm trying to like not trigger YouTube to like.
There's no triggers. It's a comedy show. They're aliens. You know? They're aliens, as we discussed earlier.
Aliens, you know, the NATO aliens. But no, what they in our fictional story, they have So what was supposed to? So what I look at is, instead of trying to, well, you do have to work through the logical things of why something is right now. But once you've gone out of, you have to also explore what the intention of something was, because like there are different forces fighting in the world, and the one team trying to get their point across, let's say, or to implement their strategy. Their long-term strategy doesn't mean that they've succeeded. And just because we see big artifacts and there's big artifacts from a timeline that didn't materialize, is what I'm saying. Because obviously the present is the accumulation of the past, right? So in the past, leading up to this moment, they were planning much bigger things, and we do have the artifacts of those things in this reality. But this reality,
I gotta make a joke. So it's like just like my house, which has artifacts of past relationships with past girlfriends, where I was building things, and that don't
on the wall or something, or what?
No, I meant like, stuff around the house, like, frames for pictures and like, trinkets and mugs and stuff.
Yeah.
Which don't actually signify that we're going to build that thing anymore, because they're just left around the house. They're not actually evidence of us building that thing.
That dream together in the future, right?
Yes.
Now, right? Yeah. So likewise, that's a very good analogy. So in a comical way, I would say that what was supposed to happen with the PLAN-demic, right, was there was not supposed to be any sort of experimental anything released for like 2 to 3 years. And during that time, it was going to create, don't just think about, the countries, the developed countries, think about all the world and its, billions of people. So all those countries, there isn't a lot of headroom for people to have a lot more economic distress, right? So they have, the point is that what was supposed to happen, but what didn't happen, was that the global South was supposed to be destroyed. It was supposed to be destroyed economically, and it was going to be the end of a lot of functioning nation states in South Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Maghreb, MENA. And this was gonna create a huge famine. You know, you would have had billions of people die of starvation, billions more fleeing, you know, the instability, the economic instability. You think about the world's supply chain and system of trade and the interdependence of countries and their interreliance for basic things. And even things that aren't basic are still, there's economic and there's power and there's, you know, militaries, and it devolves and it breaks down into warlordism and things like this. So there was a real plan to do this. And this was really going to be what I think was going to go down. And the fact that that game exists, I think, is a very good evidence of that was a plan. So the thing is that predictive programming is only so good as your ability to actually execute the plan. So I think that game, Battlefield 2042, is excellent evidence of intention to create this crime. You see, it's evidence
also,
that they wanted things to go that way, but things are not going that way.
Fun fact, they're Swedish. DICE, the developers, originally. There's also DICE LA now, but originally they're Swedish. So fun fact right there for you. And considering you're getting more into it, I will read some more of my thoughts on this. More Battlefield 2042 lore. In this map is in Egypt a farm plantation for feeding the remaining population that needs to be liberated from the Russians. This Egyptian farm does. The world is in crisis due to the lack of water and the event which took out satellite communications. If you want your family to eat, take those objectives, is the line that you hear as the map loads. Have a look at the new screen text that pops up during the loading screen. These blurbs are getting new and more relevant. Interesting. European Recovery Foundation. Now, I don't actually have a good quality zoom of that for you guys, but I can look at it here. Oh, no, I can't. Can I save this? Save as. Yes. Awesome. I can do this while we are... what? There we go. The European Recovery Foundation was formed by several members of former EU countries and anonymous corporate interests, hoping to one day rebuild a united Europe.
Yeah, so this obviously, you know, well, what that screenshot was a food farm, and it's, you know, Russia controls food and stuff like this, and that you're supposed to take it back from the Russians
in Egypt. In Egypt,
right? But the Russians control it, right? So those things, so understanding that this is a pre-2022 game, actually, right? Mm-hmm. But we know in the war that began in 2022 how quickly the food and wheat thing became a thing. Like the grain deal was, you know, a critical aspect of the geoeconomics of this geopolitical conflict, as it were. So
and the psychological warfare of like, oh my God, Russia's causing famine all over the world. Russia's going to cause everybody to like starve in Africa, right, and then it turned out. I mean, And then Russia time out. And then Russia like one-upped them and was like, okay, we'll give her the wheat for free, just take it. And it got like it came out that basically it was the insurance for the ships that was not allowing the Russians to send the fertilizer and the wheat down there, and the Russians set up their own parallel system to get around it. So it was the West basically who was driving the crisis. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. I mean, the point is that Russia is a major food producer globally, and so is the United States. Like both countries are self-sufficient on the food front and actually overproduce so much that they could feed, you know, either the U.S. or Russia could feed the entire world, right? Like no one else would have to make food, right? In hypothetically. So based on what's possible in both countries. So what that means is for the global, in a war, the food is huge, right? I mean, everyone has to eat, and not in war, food is huge, right? But in a war where you have destruction and crops are radiated or whatever. So the point is that we're saying is that the world that we're seeing right now has vestigial and artifactical, elements that are not actually what is happening, but it is evidence of a planned crime that didn't succeed to go down. I mean, they're going to keep trying, I think, but just understand that what was supposed to happen is that, like, the conflict with Russia and the West right now was being planned for a long time. I mean, clearly. So even before 2014, it was being planned, right? Because they went in there to create this conflict with that coup in that year. So into Kiev, right? With the Maidan. So just understand, just kind of putting all these together, how it's supposed to actually work. Like, you were supposed to have everyone that they were not supposed to release this for like 3 years or maybe 4. But even in 2 years, you can see that with the downstream, upstream economies globally and supply chain security, supply chain issues, that you would have had a huge disruption in production, trade, income, and it would have led to mass immiseration, conflict, war across the global south. You would have had Colombia and Venezuela having a major war. You would have had, countries in the southern region of Africa invading into South Africa, the country of South Africa. You would have had to get the resources, the mines and the diamonds and you would have had, there's just so much. And you see elements of this in the world today. So the tears and the disruptions, the micro tears are already there, like waiting to be torn apart at the seams. Like, all these things we're talking about are aspects of this reality. And
the fuses were set, but there was no cordite.
That's basically it. And so, I mean, what happened is there was a frustration in their plan in the West with the 45th president who forced these companies that already had this experimental thing ready to roll out. There was nothing they had to actually, produce or invent, because the whole thing was planned anyway, and they had just planned to not release whatever the experiment. But again, people have to get into actually understand what happened and what the world.
And they have to believe Russian propaganda. They have to believe Russian propaganda.
Yeah, this is a comedy show. We're satirizing Russian propaganda, right? So basically, what happened is that the point was that you were supposed to have an economic shutdown across the Western Bloc or developed countries. Let's say you might include like Japan, South Korea, many regions of China. You could include a number of countries into that, into this kind of developed world schema, right? But those countries, because of how much dependence other countries that are less developed have in terms of their trade, the sale of raw materials or, value added labor or offshore production in more developing parts of the world, which is most of it, right? Like, so this was going to create such a instability globally that you can see today that the whole strategy of defeating Russia was never a military question. It was always about, can you get countries to join in on sanctions and, an embargo on Russia, right? And because countries like China and India wouldn't do that, right? You basically, you got nothing.
And Serbia.
Right. I mean, that was the deal breaker, honestly. When Serbia stepped in, okay, everyone just gave up.
They're still trying to get us. They're still trying to get us to put sanctions on Russia. It's like, give up, man. Like, what are you gonna get from it? Like, just so that we heal? Is that all you want? Just to heal?
It's like fucking 7 million people, but it's like the biggest deal in the world. So, these people. Anyway, so back to our humor. They wanted. That was the plan. So, amidst that instability, so you don't need countries to sanction Russia if they actually have imploded economies and there's no basis to be importing energy into their country. And likewise, the food market and all of this is all connected. So you've seen glimpses of how the dynamic played out in reality. But now add if they had successfully done the L downs, right, and withholding anything for 3 years, 4 years, whatever. So now it's like the year 2022, right, and the Ukrainian army has 100, 200,000 soldiers building up to take. They would say retake, Donetsk and Lugansk, right, and then to keep pushing further into, maybe Belgorod in the north, maybe, anywhere east.
Rostov.
Yeah, Rostov on Don. So that would have been the immediate targets, like Belgorod, Rostov on Don, things like that. And Russia would have been economically, like, of course, they would have been trying to hold it together, but without countries in the world trading with them, the U.S. would not have been in any better situation, but they would be trying to manage the chaos as kind of an island across that's on the other side of both the Atlantic and the Pacific from the old world, right? But most of this would have been. But you can see, like with the human refugee crisis stuff from Honduras or whatever, Venezuela. Is part of these are vestigial artifacts of actually things that would have been a much bigger scale, had the PLA-NDEMIC been successful in the L-down part, you see. So that would have caused the economic disruption that would have led to the Battlefield 2042 scenario, right? So, and the war with Russia would have still happened in that timeline, but it would have been, just with, countries like China and India might be at war with each other, or there might be through proxy, through skirmishes, Myanmar or Pakistan or whatever. So, but you would have had a lot more conflict globally and a lot more, human refugee type crisis stuff and much lower production going on. So much less need for energy, meaning much less revenues for Russia. And in turn, to maintain stability and to keep people fed to prevent war, really, is what you're talking about. Russia would have had to give away grain to purchase stability in the same way that the U.S. would have to give away grain to purchase, strategic levels of necessary stability in Latin America. So it's a very complicated question. Battlefield 2042 is definitely depicting a plan that the Western elites wanted to do, but to follow the timeline that you see in that game, you would have needed this thing to be a lot more successful. In other words, right, that it wasn't released. So it was actually Operation Warp Speed that kept the Battlefield 2042 scenario from eminentizing on a timeline similar to 2042. Like, they might still get it in 2052 or whatever if they keep trying. You know what I mean? But it's clearly this conflict with Russia was planned, but it was planned to take place in the context of a broader global socioeconomic meltdown and fracturization as a result of the supply chain economy going down the tube. So that's the point.
You heard it here first. Battlefield 2042 timeline is not real because of Operation Warp Speed. Now there's a conversation starter if you ever heard one. Another quote from Hourglass Map. This one takes place in Doha, Qatar, which has been taken over by the sandstorms of global warming. There would be no Shearwater program without lithium ore. At Shearwater Lithium Industries, we strive to maximize our output while leaving the smallest ecological footprint. Sounds a lot like Rio Tinto.
Right. It's a Rio Tinto reference.
Should we just leave that there?
Yeah,
We've gone well over the hour. We're off officially 1 hour and 10 minutes in. If this was like a radio show, like the hard commercial would have cut in and you wouldn't have gotten to say what you wanted to say. So my question to you remains, do you want to record yet again, or do you want to sum up today's talk and comedic experience? And we'll call it a day as far as recording is concerned.
You know what? I'll just summarize that. I think you said it pretty good. I mean, it's you summarized what was said. It's basically Operation Warp Speed has prevented the Battlefield 2042 timeline from imminentizing or from, coming into being. And it's clear that this is connected to themes like Build Back Better and the Great Reset and other things that failed, other elite projects in the past 5 years that have really failed. And it's questionable to what extent they believed that, it could succeed, or whatever disagreements they had over its potential to succeed. But I think that, what the 45th president had to do was exercise executive...
The golfer. Stop referring to him like that.
Yeah, what the golfer, what the red-hatted golfer had to do was, what he had to do was basically create a military law, a wartime law, to force these producers of the thing to spit it up, because they had it, and he knew they had it. He knew they had it. They were playing this game about, well, we need to first study this thing, and it's like, you guys made this thing, so it's all good. But that's how I would summarize it. Yeah.
All right, excellent. I will pop up another meme. I was sent in by Citizen 1001. As we roll this out, we had memes. This is in that Battlefield 2042 timeline. All right. Xoaquin, thank you again for stopping by. Excellent talk. We'll be back sooner or later. Everybody, like, share, subscribe. You know what to do. Leave a comment if you have one. You should have one after this talk. Realistically. All right, that's enough for me. Xoaquin, talk to you later.